Good afternoon and welcome to the Planning and Natural Resources Committee of Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. I am not Jed Sear. Jed is to my left. I'm Karen Holman, committee member. This meeting is now called to order. It is 2 p.m. on April 4, 2023. The meeting is being held in person at the district's administrative office and by teleconference pursuant to Government Code Section 54953. Members of the public can attend and participate in the meeting in person or via Zoom. Instructions for submitting public comments are available on the meeting agenda. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Director Gleason.
Here.
Director Holman.
Here.
Director Sear.
Present.
Thank you.
First item on the agenda is, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gleason.
Yes.
Director Holman.
Yes.
Director Sear.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
There's always a time on the agenda for the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any oral communications commenters?
Director Holman, we do not have any. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Next then on the agenda, moving right along, is approval of the March 21 P&R committee minutes. Were there any corrections or motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the minutes. Oh, second.
Okay, so again, we have a motion and a second. We have a
Director
vote, please.
Gleason.
Yes.
Director Holman.
Yes.
Director Sear.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, the next item will not go so quickly. Highway 35 multi-use trail crossing and parking feasibility study. This is our business item number 1, and I know we have a staff presentation and we have dual presenters, it looks like. So take it away.
Good afternoon, committee members and everyone.
Can you
raise
it up a little bit?
Yep, I'm sorry. Okay, is that a little better? No, okay. I can just hold it too.
Today we're using a lapel microphone. Our lectern podium wasn't working, so we have to kind of rely on this, but you just have to kind of talk into it a little bit more.
Okay. Okay. Got it. I can hear it now. All right. Thanks for that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brittany Wheatman. I'm a planner 2 at Midpen, and with me today is Scott Reeves, Senior Capital Project Manager. And today we'll be presenting the Highway 35 multi-use trail crossing and parking expansion feasibility study. The general manager's recommendations for the committee are, first, to receive a presentation on the Highway 35 project, and second, for the committee to provide feedback on parking capacity and multimodal access elements in order to begin developing our conceptual design alternatives. Here is an overview of what we'll cover in today's presentation. And as you can see, we have built in a few times to pause for committee questions, just to make sure that everything is clear before moving on to the next sections. The project is located at the Purisima North Ridge parking area, and the project came about as a partnership between the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, POST, and the Bay Area Ridge Trail Council. And as you can see from the map that's shown here, Purisima is an important junction for regional trail connections. And some regional trails to note here are existing segments of the Bay Area Ridge Trail that's shown in yellow. And there are existing segments of the Bay Area Ridge Trail that are already within Purisima. And SFPUC is proposing to develop an extension of the Bay Area Ridge Trail. Let me turn on my pointer. That's shown at the top of the map here. And this proposed Ridge Trail extension will come down along the east side of Highway 35 and terminate just south of the North Ridge parking area. So the location of this proposed Ridge Trail extension was really the impetus for studying a trail connection from existing segments of the Bay Area Ridge Trail within Prisma at the North Ridge parking area to connect to the proposed Ridge Trail extension on the other side of Highway 35. Then some other regional trails to note here are the Bay to Sea Trail, which will have some segments that will run through Prisma as well. And Midpen is currently implementing or is working on the implementation of the southern leg through the Prisma to the Sea Trail and parking project. And both legs of the Bay to Sea Trail will connect to the California Coastal Trail that's shown along the coast. I also want to point out that Prisma is currently served by 4 parking areas, 2 of which are formal parking lots, which include the Prisma Creek Road parking area, which is accessible from the coast side, as well as the North Ridge parking area that is accessible from Highway 35 and is currently our largest parking area at Prisma.
Can I make a suggestion is because there's so much going on this map that for maybe people who are watching online, if you can use a pointer,
Oh,
that
sure.
would be great.
Yes, of
to help
course.
Everybody follow along. Thanks.
Yes, of course. Sorry about that. So the 2 formal parking areas I was talking about were here, the Prisma Creek Road parking area and the North Ridge parking area up along Highway 35. And once again, North Ridge is our largest parking area at Prisma. And then we also have these 2 informal roadside parking areas, the Redwood roadside parking area and Grabtown Gulch roadside parking area. So the project has 4 main elements, and that includes a multi-use trail crossing on Highway 35 and a spur trail connection that will connect the trail crossing to the new extension of the Bay Area Ridge Trail on SFPUC watershed lands east of Highway 35. The project is also exploring the expansion and reconfiguration of the Prisma North Ridge parking area to address potential increase in visitors at the North Ridge trailhead, as well as looking into improved trailhead amenities at North Ridge. We also have 2 main project goals. The first is to support the implementation of the regional Bay Area Ridge Trail. And we've identified some strategies to help address this goal, which include identifying a multi-use trail crossing location that maximizes safety, making sure that the trail crossing accommodates the same users as the Bay Area Ridge Trail. So that's hiking, biking, and equestrian use. Continuing to collaborate with our partner agencies in the planning and implementation of the multi-use crossing and the spur trail connection. Then our second goal is to improve public access and visitor experience at Prisma's North Ridge trailhead. And some strategies to address this goal include adding parking capacity through expansion and reconfiguration of the North Ridge parking area, improving trailhead amenities at the trailhead, including an ADA accessible vault restroom, incorporating recommendations from the board-approved Prisma multimodal access study, designing amenities at the trailhead to protect the Highway 35 scenic corridor and maximize user safety at the trailhead, as well as utilize adaptive management strategies to address any issues that might arise from an increase in visitation at the North Ridge trailhead. So we're currently in phase 1 of the project, which is development of the feasibility study. And this phase kicked off in October of 2020 with board approval of grant funding from SFPUC for the development of the feasibility study. And since then, staff have developed project goals, which I just went over, contracted various technical studies, and developed an opportunities and constraints analysis. And at the same time as all of those efforts, we've also been engaging in focused stakeholder meetings and are continuing to engage with our project partners. We're also considering and incorporating recommendations that came from the Prisma multimodal access study, which does provide multimodal recommendations specific to the North Ridge parking area. And we're also working in collaboration with other related projects at Prisma, including the Prisma to the Sea Trail. And that brings us to this afternoon's meeting, where we hope to gather feedback from the committee about for the development of conceptual design and project alternatives. And some future meetings that are part of this phase will include going back to the Planning and Natural Resources Committee later this summer to present conceptual design alternatives, and then to go to the full board later this year in the fall or winter. And that'll essentially wrap up phase 1 of the project before we go into future phases that include CEQA environmental review, design, development, and permitting, as well as construction. So this map shows our general project study areas, and the overall study area extends beyond just the footprints we're looking at for parking expansion and trail connection. So I just want to point out the 4 main project areas. They include the Spur Trail Connection Study Area, which is east of Highway 35 on SFPUC watershed lands. They also include the Traffic Study Area, which is this green area shown on the map that goes over the Highway 35 right-of-way. And then we also have these upper and lower expansion study areas. And later on, Scott will discuss the specific locations we're looking at for parking expansion. But these study areas are just meant to show what we analyzed in our technical studies and not necessarily the entire areas that we're looking at for parking expansion. And I do want to point out specifically that this lower parking expansion area does include a district employee residence, and we included this entire area simply to evaluate all the resources within this area, but we don't plan to demolish or change the district employee residence in any way. Okay. So here are some conditions of the existing Northridge parking area. We have the existing gravel lot right here, and this does not have any delineated parking spaces, but can fit about 41 standard vehicles, and does have some designated ADA parking areas nearer to the trailhead. It can also accommodate up to 2 equestrian trailers parked along the northwest side of the gravel parking lot. And there is space for parking along the shoulder of Highway 35, which can fit about 13 to 14 cars, depending on how people park. The parking area also has a one-way entrance to the south here and one-way exit to the north, which keeps circulation through the parking area moving pretty well. Next to the parking area, we have this upper open space, which is used as an informal helicopter landing zone by CAL FIRE and other agencies for emergency response. We also have an internal driveway that leads down to the district employee residence and this other open space next to it. This area just north of Northridge is private property that's owned by Fisher Investments. So that's what you see up here. Then going down to the trailhead, this is located near the parking area entrance and has some standard district amenities for the trailheads, including equestrian hitching post, map and signboards, a boot brush, and a single stall vault restroom, which is unfortunately not ADA compliant. The trailhead also offers access to hiking, cycling, and equestrian trails. So here's an image from the street view of the parking area entrance. And just beyond this driveway is where the trailhead and vault restroom are located. Here's an image of the exit driveway. And just beyond this driveway, you can see where the internal driveway starts that leads down to the employee residence. Then here's another street view of the parking area entrance as if you were driving north along Highway 35. Here's a view of the upper open area we were talking about that's located next to the existing gravel parking lot. This view is looking toward the trailhead, and you can see that there is a similar grade between the existing gravel lot and the open area next to it. It's another view of that upper open area looking northwest. And then here we have a view of the lower open area. And here's the district employee residence in the background. And this structure is a separated garage that serves the residents. And this area, or this photo was taken from that upper open area, but it is screened from the Highway 35. There's a lot of vegetation that separates it from the upper open area, and it's also at a slightly lower elevation than the current parking area, so it is not visible from the highway. And then here we have a photo of the trailhead itself. We have identified some ADA barriers to this trailhead that we'd like to address. So we are looking into providing parking that meets current ADA code and also providing an ADA compliant restroom with an accessible route. So, I mean, replacing the current vault restroom shown here. We also conducted a number of, We conducted a number of technical studies for the project, which include field scouting, boundary and topography surveys, biological surveys, cultural and historic resource surveys, as well as a traffic study. And after today's meeting, we will also be conducting some geotechnical studies. So geotechnical recommendations are forthcoming. And just to quickly go over some key takeaways from our technical studies. As you saw from some of the photos, the upper and lower open areas have been previously disturbed, and our biological studies did confirm that there are no biological resources of concern throughout the entire project area. The cultural resource survey also did not identify any known cultural resources and did conclude that it's very unlikely for archaeological resources to be present within the project areas. We also had a historic resource survey evaluate the on-site employee residence. And although the residence was built over 50 years ago, it was heavily renovated before the district acquired it and no longer has contributing historic elements. So it is not eligible for listing on local, state, or national historic inventory lists. And just to clarify again, the project is not proposing any changes to the structure or its operations. We just had the historic resource evaluation to make sure that there were no historic elements that we should be considering for planning. There's also field scouting work that was done on the SFPUC watershed lands, and it studied the entire area that we showed on the previous maps to find the best location for a feasible spur trail alignment. And the field scouting was able to identify a preferred trail alignment on those lands. So next, Scott is going to be discussing the results and recommendations from our traffic study. But before we get there, are there any questions on what has been presented so far?
Looks like we can go ahead. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
I do have one. I'm sorry. So from the photos, I apologize. Help you get your steps in today. When we toured there, thank you, Scott and Susanna, who isn't here for the tour. When we toured there, it seemed like there was screening between the residents and the lower parking area that I really couldn't online or in this presentation identify. Do I misremember?
I think there is some vegetative screening right in front of the district residents, but it's not very significant.
Yeah, I guess I'm misremembering it because I thought it was more screening there.
It's this section right here that really does screen all of the area.
Thank you. Yeah, Gretchen just pointed out that this vegetation up here between the upper and lower areas may also have been what you remember. It does screen this entire lower area from the existing lot.
Yeah, I do remember that. I was remembering something else too that I think I'm misremembering. So, okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Scott Reeves, Senior Capital Project Manager. Thanks for having us here today. So I'm going to start to talk about the traffic study, the process and the results. But I want to acknowledge first, public safety is very important, if not paramount, to all of our projects here at Midpen. We realize that introducing a crossing at this location should not be taken lightly. And so we feel that we've done our due diligence to carefully evaluate the feasibility of this crossing by hiring TJKM traffic engineers to facilitate this. They did so within conformance with Caltrans highway design manuals, as well as the Manual of Uniform Design Control devices. So their approach was to evaluate several different components, and I'll talk about each of these in detail. But to summarize them, it was level of service, the traffic volume, the vehicle speed, collision history, and sight distances. They did so with field collection data completed first in March of 2022, and then actual vehicle counts over a 48-hour period in April of 2022. It's also important to note that they collaborated with Caltrans throughout their study process, and I'll talk about that a little bit at the end too. So to start talking about level of service first, this is a qualitative term. It's used to describe a roadway's operating condition, or really the volume of traffic on a specific roadway. The level of service is designated by a grade, kind of like in school, ranging from A to F, A being free-flowing conditions with no delays, to F, which represents forced flow, heavy congestion, excessive delays. We drew on the 2019 San Mateo County Congestion Management Program study, which presented historical and current existing level of service for our stretch of roadway, and it used the Highway Capacity Manual methodology. This stretch of Highway 35 has a level of service grade of B, which is a good range. It presents minimal congestion. It also meets the county's level of service goal for this highway, which is also a B. And so where that takes us is into site-specific volume measurements, which we took through our traffic engineer. So in April 2022, we spent 48 hours on site measuring and counting cars and classifying them as well. The weather during that period was average, with highs in the mid to high 60s and generally clear weather. Our preserves were open during that time. Traffic volume measured during that 48-hour period was a total of 4,472 cars, about 2,200 per day, and that was generally balanced between northbound and southbound. Peak volumes were observed at 11 to noon, and again at 4 to 5 on the Sunday, the 24th. About 225 to 230 vehicles in that 1 hour time frame at 11 to 12 and 4 to 5, or about 4 vehicles per minute passing the site. That 2019 San Mateo County Congestion Management Program study identifies that this 2-lane highway can handle 2,800 vehicles per hour, or 46 vehicles per minute. So we're well under that volume measurement. And the reason I bring this up is because we wanted to confirm if any right-of-way changes would need to be proposed. For example, a turn pocket, additional ingress or egress lanes, or other right-of-way widening or considerations, and none were found. The other point to note on this as well is that the majority of our vehicles that were observed passing on Highway 35 were standard passenger vehicles and motorcycles. So the other piece of data collection was vehicle speeds during that 48-hour period. And this will determine our design speed. The design speed dictates how much sight distance is required for a vehicle to stop and for a person to determine if they can cross the road. The Highway Design Manual recommends that we use the 85th percentile for this design speed, meaning that 85% of the vehicles measured were traveling slower than this design speed, 15% exceeding it. And just for context, the posted speed limit on this stretch of highway is 50 miles an hour, and the average speed measured throughout that 48-hour period was 42 to 44 miles per hour. The 85th percentile measured in the northbound was approaching 52 miles per hour, and southbound was 51 miles per hour. So generally consistent among the two. Finally, we looked to further inform our feasibility. The last 5 years of collision data was retrieved from UC Berkeley, their TIMS system. And that's important to note because it also incorporates the CHP statewide SWITR's database in its data collection. And we looked at 5,000-foot radius around our project site. The data reported for the last 5 years, 6 collisions in the sphere of influence of the project site, 4 of which were between 2 vehicles, and the other 2 were just a solo vehicle incident. And they all reported injury, but no death. And none of them were immediately adjacent to our project area. It's important to note as well that the incident rate in this stretch was significantly lower than other stretches throughout Skyline Boulevard. And I mentioned this one as well because this also supports the feasibility of a crossing here, just based on this historical data. So our traffic engineers concluded their work with a series of recommendations that are shown here in graphic form. The first was to maintain the existing entrance. Let's see, there. And exit, there. Their second recommendation was to locate an on-grade crossing immediately adjacent to the exit. They recommend using a design speed of 55 miles per hour, which is above what the 85th percentile was that was measured at 51 to 52. And that's what it will inform our sight distance clearances that would be required. And so those sight distances are 2 different items. The first is what is shown in red, which is our clear zone that needs to be the sight lines maintained in either direction. And this at 55 miles an hour equates to 500 feet of sight distance clearance. And then the second would be advanced signage, both in the southbound and in the northbound, of 325 feet from the crossing location. And then their final recommendation to further support the clear sight distances was to have 140 feet of no parking zone, which is shown in red, immediately south of the crossing location. So this would equate to approximately 10 shoulder parking stalls being removed in order to implement the on-grade crossing. And I mentioned previously that we've coordinated with Caltrans on this work. So we submitted our traffic study for review and comment. There will be no formal opinion issued by Caltrans until we issue an encroachment permit, or until we submit for encroachment permit. But they did provide feedback, and they did suggest refinements for us and engaged in informal dialogue with our traffic engineers. And all of those comments have been incorporated into the final report. So I wanted to just highlight other on-grade crossings in the vicinity of this project area along Skyline Boulevard. There are 4 here in the example, some of which are in front of our preserves. And 2 of the 4 shown here are also equestrian crossings, similar to what we would propose at the Northridge lot. And one important feature to note on these is that there's no striping on the ground with any of these. There's just a sign delineating or denoting the general area where the crossing would be occurring. So when we consider traffic, we also need to touch on the parking demand issues at Northridge. The Prisma multimodal access study formally did study this issue and gave us a series of recommendations that we call the TDMs, or Transportation Demand Management Strategies. So as we look to begin our design work, we're asking to reaffirm these recommendations, as some of them will have design implications for us that will need to be considered in our initial design efforts. And so I've underlined those ones, but I'll talk through them all with you. And they're categorized by priority levels as determined in the Prisma study. So the first would be peak period parking reservations or priority parking. And so this may be an area that's denoted on site or separately controlled, where people can reserve a space, perhaps online, and have a spot waiting for them. The second would be bicycle parking and bicycle facilities, including repair stations. The third would be to temporarily redesignate spaces, and we call this flex parking. And so this could mean that we have equestrian parking on some days, that's passenger vehicles on others, depending on demand, or carpool or shuttle, but really just having paved spaces that can really flex depending on what demand is warranted. The next would be real-time parking lot occupancy sensors and signage, similar to programs that we've implemented at preserves such as Rancho San Antonio. And then the last high priority item would be electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The only way that this really impacts our design is to make sure that our cost estimates accommodate for the power requirements and such that would be required for EV charging. Lower priority TDMs included vehicle wayfinding signage, so that if somebody reached the preserve and it was full, the parking lot was full, they could navigate to a similar recreation opportunity nearby at perhaps another preserve or other open space. To clearly identify the permitted on-street and shoulder parking, and then to accommodate future shuttle and transit systems. And it can be noted that this last item is kind of a big idea and would require a lot of regional planning. And so at this stage, what we would like to be able to do is to plan for that future, should it come. And so we want to be able to kind of use our flex parking idea to be ready if a shuttle program did come to this parking lot. So I'm going to summarize just real quickly at the end of our technical study portion here, the high level takeaways, but I wanted to just re-show again the different areas that we'll be talking about. And so we'll first summarize the spur trail and the on-grade crossing studies locations. And then we'll summarize the upper expansion areas, and then the lower expansion areas, and then some of the trailhead amenity opportunities and constraints. So for the multi-use trail crossing and the spur trail, the opportunities include a crossing location that has been deemed feasible by our traffic engineer. Also that we have an important regional connection. We really see this as a great opportunity. And that we have example crossings along Highway 35. So precedent has been set in other areas that we can draw from experience on. The constraint to acknowledge is that safety concerns have been raised about traffic speeds along Highway 35. In our upper expansion area, we have no biological, cultural, or historic resources that would suggest mitigation requirements beyond what our typical mitigation would be. We have open and generally flat areas, which is a rarity for us. The upper area is adjacent to an existing parking lot, so we can maximize we can stretch our dollars there by expanding that area. And we have an existing infrastructure of the entry and exit off of Highway 35 as an opportunity. And then our constraint for that upper area expansion is that we're in a scenic corridor. And so we need to be very cognizant and comply with county as well as state scenic corridor guidelines. In the lower area, similarly, no biological, cultural, or resource findings for us. Open and generally flat area. It also has its own unique driveway with gate access. I think this is unique because if we look at that lower area as its own controllable space, perhaps for a reservation or a priority lot, we have the ability to control that through that driveway, that driveway infrastructure. For the constraints, the lower area is separated vertically from the upper area. So we have ADA requirements that we would need to meet. So likely we would have a walkway, a path of travel that spans between the two areas to connect them together. And that we are in close proximity to a district employee residence. And then for the trailhead amenities, our opportunities include, we have a flat space. We can really meet ADA requirements with this project and with our restroom. We have space available to accommodate these amenities, and we do have power on site to accommodate EV charging. For our constraints, our new location for the ADA restroom would move it into possibly a more visible location from the highway. And we do not currently have a sewer connection for that restroom. So we would seek a variance with the Department of Environmental Health at the county to do a vault restroom. So I'm going to talk a little bit about spatial analysis real quick to give us an idea of what would fit at this site. But I wanted to start by putting a couple questions in your mind that are paramount to helping us move forward into conceptual design. And the first is considering parking capacity. So we'd like to talk about or hear from you all today. How many standard vehicles, how many equestrian vehicles, and how many specialty vehicles should we strive to incorporate into our designs? Which TDMs should we prioritize? And are there others that we should consider when we are developing our alternatives? Should we consider both parking areas? Should we design to both? And when I say both, I mean the upper and the lower expansion areas. Are there other amenities that we should consider as part of this project? And are there other considerations to an on-grade crossing that we need to evaluate? So I've gone ahead and I've looked at each one of these spaces in terms of what could fit. How many cars could we fit? And these are rough estimates at this stage because we haven't yet started any earnest design work, but we do have some tools to be able to understand what our capacities are. And so I think that'll help us to move the conversation forward to really understand what our max parking capacity would be. And so starting with the shoulder area within Skyline Boulevard, we estimate that we can fit 7 cars in our future effort. This is less than existing because we would be eliminating several stalls in order to keep our sight lines for our crossing. But we would estimate 7 cars in the shoulder in front of our property, or the northern of those 2 spaces here could also accommodate a shuttle, in which case it would be 3 cars in the southern space and a shuttle in the northern space. Moving over to our existing lot and our upper expansion area together as one collective parking area, we estimate 65 to 70 cars total. Or if we wanted to accommodate equestrians and shuttles in that area, it would be 40 to 50 cars plus 2 to 4 equestrian or shuttles. This also presumes we keep our existing circulation patterns of entrance in the south, pull through, and exit to the north. And then in our lower expansion area, we would connect it with a 2-way driveway, and we could accommodate up to 20 cars or 2 to 4 equestrian, or 2 equestrian or shuttle vehicles. And the reason that number is so much different is because of the turning radius of those longer vehicles, whether they be equestrian with trailer or a shuttle. So I think at this point, we have another opportunity to take a break for questions. I think we'll circle back to that graphic certainly during your discussion as well, but happy to take questions in the meantime.
Chad has questions.
Director Fear, were any pedestrians involved in the collisions on 35 over the course?
No.
Thank you.
Director Gleason?
Yeah, does that apply to bikes as well?
That's a great question. I'm not sure if it does.
No questions. Yeah, I think the current proposal is to not have a flashing light at this crossing. Is that correct?
That's correct. The report does not include a flashing beacon, but considers one, should it come about through the Caltrans encroachment process. Meaning it's an acceptable addition to the project from the traffic engineer's perspective. But their baseline recommendation does not include it.
I see. And from our perspective, do we have any position on that?
I'm not sure I can comment on that. I think there's pros and cons to it. It came about through our stakeholder engagement process and the fog consideration, that it would be an advantage to have one, but also there's a scenic corridor downside to that. I think our goal is to strive to meet Caltrans requirements, and truly through the encroachment process, it will come to the surface whether or not if Caltrans requires it.
Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. When I was reading the report, I was thinking about ingress and egress and safety and such. And I see the line of sight study and all of that. I'm wondering though, because equestrian vehicles are so much longer, do they require, and I'm thinking particularly about egress, do equestrian trailers, along with the towing vehicle, do they require a longer line of sight? And if so, are we accommodating and accounting for that? But it's not a car.
True, right. Their acceleration speed is slower. I believe.
And they're longer. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I believe the design manual takes into account all types of vehicles in that ingress egress sightline consideration.
That would be, for me, it'd be a really important one to have confirmation of.
Mhm.
That's one. Then so what was the request? In the report, it talks about there was public outreach and this and that, and one of the comments had to do with equestrian, and I'm kind of focused on that because of the safety issue
Mhm.
in particular, but not solely. Because I'm also remembering the study that was done about Midpen and what people, find important and stuff, and equestrian really dropped down. It's not to say we don't do it, but it really dropped down. And so how much was that an interest from people that were participating in the public outreach compared to hikers and such?
There was an interest there. It's hard to gauge based on the few meetings that we had. It wasn't as prevalent a topic. I think also equestrian use historically at this parking lot has been lower than others. And perhaps that's partially because of just ability to get an equestrian stall or equestrian parking space here. It may be a challenge. People don't try to park their equestrian, bring their horses out here. So yeah, I would say that the feedback, we did hear feedback that horses were important, but it wasn't the focus of any of our public feedback. you know, it wasn't an overwhelming discussion point for us.
So for me, there's an important, and if you'd like to speak, ma'am, you can turn a card in with you already are doing that. Okay. I think for me, that would be an important point to kind of drill down on a little bit because they take up so much space. And the staff report and the presentation both talk about like 2 to 4 equestrian stalls. That's a lot of real estate, the difference between 2 and 4. So that would be really important. And then the confirming like the line of sight for the longer, slower vehicles that are equestrian. Do you have more questions?
And by the way, we have more presentation and then we can get into kind of a full deliberation if that helps you at all. We still haven't talked about our stakeholder engagement yet, so we can summarize that too.
I just thought, the material that we've covered so
Sure.
far, though, those things came up for me.
Great.
Yeah, I think I'd like to have more of that discussion, but maybe we should go through the rest of the presentation. And I think there's also public comment that we should hear.
Yeah, I just had one other, which is, I think the helicopter landing, that's going to be upcoming probably.
Yeah,
You
we
wanna comment on that now?
we can talk about it now or later, certainly. We understand that the informal landing zone is within the footprint of that upper expansion area. Our visitor services department, and specifically Chris Baresi, has been in discussions with all of the local fire districts that use it. There are other locations that have been identified, both existing as well as one proposed within the vicinity of the project site.
And it wasn't clear what the feedback had been about those alternate sites, just that there had been some identified. And I don't know, or didn't notice like how often is it used? If that matters or not. If it's used, it's used. So, and when it's needed, it's needed. But I didn't see any response really to what those feasibility or those other sites as being feasible and how feasible are they?
Right. So there's one proposed site about a mile north, and then there's in use. There's, I think, 3, maybe 4, three other sites that are within the vicinity that are actively used at this point.
Oh, that wasn't clear to me. They're already being used.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. We can go on, I think, to the rest of the presentation. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, I'll invite Brittany to
Yeah,
come
we
back
can.
up and
Okay, Director Gleason.
Yeah, just this might help my understanding going forward. You've talked about space for 2 shuttles in one place and 4 shuttles in another place, and then 1 on the street, that sort of thing. If we were to implement a shuttle program, do you have a sense of what is the actual need? For example, would that one spot on the street be able to accommodate some realistic shuttle program, or do you need another staging area and so forth?
Jane, go ahead.
Thank you, Scott. J. Mark, Planning Manager. In regards to the shuttle program for the Prisma Creek Redwoods Preserve, that has not been designed yet. As you know, the board, we are implementing a shuttle program at Rancho San Antonio. So our approach is to pilot the shuttle program at Rancho San Antonio, take lessons learned and see what best practices come out of that shuttle program before we start working on a new shuttle program at Prisma Creek Redwoods. So those very excellent questions that you're asking, Director Gleason, will be part of the design and the scoping of what the potential shuttle may be at Prisma Creek Redwoods.
And do you know at Rancho, do we know already what, say, the real-time requirements for shuttles at the parking lot would be? I mean, is it one space or 2 spaces or?
That's being studied right now.
Okay.
I don't have a specific response to that.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Thanks.
I have a quick follow-up for that too, which is, and just refresh my memory here, having to do with the shuttle study for Rancho. Are we looking at specified days for shuttle? I don't remember that being a part of what we were looking at. Is it? And I just don't remember.
Meaning, are we looking just on weekends versus weekdays?
Well, as I understood this, is that we're looking at maybe some days should be set aside for prioritizing shuttle parking. Did I misunderstand, or that's what I thought I understood?
So in regards to the potential shuttle area here at Prisma Northridge parking area, we're looking at a flexible space and we haven't really designed it yet. So in terms of whether it's only for specific times of the week or weekend, that's hasn't been programmed yet at this point.
I understand that, but is that consistent with what we're also considering at Rancho? So we're taking the learnings from Rancho and applying them other places, including potentially here.
Right.
Is that how we're scheduling and studying and what we're studying at Rancho?
So for Rancho, it's a more urban environment. So our clientele will be slightly different in terms of the usage and where they're coming from, the points of pickup and frequency. I think the goal and intent for the Rancho shuttle is to have it throughout the week and weekend because we have peak periods during weekday use as well.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right, so now to cover some of the stakeholder engagement that we've done to date. We have met multiple times with our partner agencies, which includes the SFPUC, Ridge Trail Council, and Post. We also had a meeting with the Peninsula Trails team, which is a group of regional stakeholders that meets regularly and includes our project partners, as well as the California Coastal Conservancy, the County of San Mateo, National Park Service, then Golden Gate National Recreation Area, as well as the district. We also met with different neighborhood groups, which include the Kings Mountain Association, which is a local community organization. And we also met with Fisher Investments, which is the neighboring property to the north of the Northridge Trailhead. And Midpen also hosted 2 stakeholder group meetings, which are focused meetings where we invited members of the public from 2 general groups, which include neighbors as well as preserve users, so hikers, cyclists, and equestrians. And then we have also referred to the feedback that's been collected as part of other related projects at Prisma, including the Prisma Multimodal Access Study and the ongoing efforts for the Prisma to the Sea project. And I know we already covered some of the feedback that's been heard, but to just talk about general topics that we've heard so far. Traffic and safety, of course, was the main concern or the main group of main theme that we heard from a lot of these meetings. Especially the overall safety of a multi-use crossing and comments about crossing infrastructure, historic traffic accident data, which Scott shared earlier, and also about other conditions that should be considered along Highway 35 that could impact safety, such as the fog. We also heard multiple comments regarding parking and visitor capacity. So those focused on looking at other modes to access the trailhead that could potentially alleviate parking congestion at Northridge, as well as improving access for specific user groups such as equestrians. And we did have a meeting with Fisher Investments to ask them about the potential to share their parking area, maybe during weekends or other peak visitation periods. But they did share that they were not ready to pursue something like that. So we're respecting their comments and not looking into that at this time. We also received general support for the proposed trailhead amenities and suggestions to include more information at the trailhead regarding emergency response information. And overall, there has been general support for the project as long as traffic and safety concerns are addressed. And also some comments about considering additional impacts from an increase in visitors at Northridge, as well as some comments about the impacts from converting the helicopter landing zone on the fire response in that area. So looking ahead for next steps for this phase, as I mentioned earlier, we do plan to come back to the Planning and Natural Resources Committee later this summer with some parking design alternatives, and then to proceed to provide recommendations to the full board, which we anticipate would be in the fall or winter of this year. And here, when we go to the full board, we'll present the alternatives and have the board select a preferred alternative that would then move forward to the environmental review process. And then again, just to go back to some of the questions and recap these before we move into a full discussion. We would like some feedback from the committee regarding parking capacity, specifically the ratio of standard vehicles, specialty parking areas, and equestrian parking that should be considered at Northridge, as well as the TDMs that should be prioritized. Secondly, to consider whether both parking expansion areas should be utilized. The third question is considering any other amenities that should be included up at the Northridge Trailhead, as well as any other considerations for the on-grade crossing that should be evaluated. And then again, to revisit the general manager's recommendations for the committee, to first receive the presentation on this project, and secondly, to provide feedback on parking capacity and multimodal access elements to help evaluate through the next phase of the project work, which is the development of the parking area conceptual design alternatives. And with that, I think we're ready to move on to committee discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have members of the public who want to speak, who are in attendance. And do we have any online speakers?
Director Holman, we do not have any online speakers.
Okay, so we have one in-person speaker, and you'll have 3 minutes once you get situated up at the podium. Yeah. And please state your name.
Okay, give me my 3-minute timing. Mike Bashu, E-Track, Equestrian, and I'll turn my card into you in a second because I have my notes on the back. Okay, we don't have it up where we can show the slide that has the question slide on it. If you could pop that up, I would appreciate it. No,
I'm sorry, we won't be able
we won't be able to. Okay. I'll go back to it and let you guys show it afterwards. And the reason why is it's a perfect example of what's going on here. There are supposed to be 2 equestrian parking spots in that picture that are shown. There are 12 cars sitting in them on that day that picture was taken. Just for your information. The main trail going out of here is off to the left. It goes downhill at about a 12-degree grade. This place is presently not one of the better places for equestrians to ride out of, just due to the limited types of trails. With the addition of the trail going across the road, this is going to greatly expand a top of the ridge ride that would be 6 miles long, or 6 miles out, 6 miles back, 12 miles. If I decide to ride all the way down to Highway 1 and do a piggyback with another person with a 3-horse trailer, it would be a great way for me to do it. So from my standpoint, yes, I would like to see equestrian parking at this facility. I go for 2+2 when I say these things, 2 dedicated spots, 2 that might be flexible. And that gives us the ability that most people come up with 1 or 2 trailers maximum. I don't think you have enough people in there that really has a conflict of multiple groups at the same time coming in. And so that's where I would say trying to deal with that. I haven't seen in the presentation a utilization survey that shows how many spots are presently being used for cars at the facility to tell our board how many they should be looking at and what type of quantity are in there. I would highly recommend that. I'm a fan of crossing lights. I understand that it might not be required, But if we start getting cars that go through there at 1 or 2, 3, 4 a minute, I think you were saying, if you can push a button, the thing flashes, it gives people the ability, A, on the road to slow down, B, for us to have some confidence that they should be looking at us. And I really think that we could go with a extended use down to the lower area for the equestrian parking as a area that's locked off or closed, and we could have to call for it or something if we know what's available to us. I would prefer that over getting up there and finding 12 cars sitting in my parking spot. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
And
Thank you, Mike.
thank you very much. Do we have questions then? Dr. Sear? Questions or comments?
Yeah, quick question. I can't recall, do we allow dog walking in this preserve? No, so we don't have to worry about additional amenities at the parking lot, like dog waste containers and that sort of thing. So it seems to me that the amenities that are presented would be adequate. Okay, I have some general comments, but no more questions. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions, Director Gleason? Or are we ready for comments? Okay, and if we could get the question slide up on the screen, that would probably be helpful. There we go. Thank you a lot. Director Gleason, comments?
Yeah, these might not be in a rational order, but so one comment, I know that the shuttle program is farther out in consideration, but I think there are some reasons to think that shuttles might be an interesting option up there. And one reason is that we're adding to the Bay Area Ridge Trail, and people may tend to want to hike that in one direction. So there are actually two segments of it there that are pretty interesting. One is from the, I think, Redwood parking area to the North Ridge through Purisma Creek, and then the other one is the new SFPUC alignment. And, you know, conceivably people might be doing one or both of those. So I think just an interesting thing to think about is the possibility of shuttles that would help people hike those segments. I don't know if that's feasible, but just something to think about. I think another consideration along the same lines is that if we don't have that type of shuttle, some people will self-shuttle on those same segments, and that, you know, will sort of double the parking demand for whichever people are doing that. About the equestrian parking, so I think we are actually adding some pretty interesting routes related to these regional trails from the top of Purisma down to the sea, and then along the Ridge Trail as well. So I think it's a good idea to, you know, consider that as a good equestrian opportunity. And what I would ask is for people to be as flexible as possible to also help us manage the demand of the parking at the peak times. So maybe that goes back to the flex parking idea, being able to use the spaces for different purposes on different days. I think personally, I feel like I think we did see some data on the parking demand in the past, and we know that it overflows frequently definitely on weekends in the summer, but maybe many times during the year. So I think we do need help in managing that peak demand. And if, you know, if the different user groups can be flexible to help us do that and maybe get more cars in there on peak days, that could be important. Let's see. Yeah, I think we can go on for now. Yeah.
Dr. Sear, comments?
Yeah, generally, it's obvious a whole lot of work and thought and care has gone into this. I just was comparing it to a constituent who was disappointed that we weren't cranking out trails. And this is an obvious reason why not. There's a lot of very careful thought that goes into just where a trail might be needed, let alone all the construction considerations of the trail. So I thought that was really important. And I want to commend staff for a very thorough job. I learned a whole lot more about planning a trail than I ever needed to before. So I really, really appreciate it. And I think that's it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I really like the idea of the flexible parking. I really like the idea of that. I don't know how you'll find out if I'm just going to make this up, if Thursday's a good day to have more equestrian access or not. Before going into that though, just using equestrian as an example, I think it'd be really good, to the extent that you can, find out really what the equestrian demand is. I've listened to our public speaker and Director Gleason about what the Upper New Trail is going to provide in terms of desire for equestrians. So maybe we can't even get a good gauge yet until the trail is there. Don't know. And but I think that would be important to help us gauge what we do. Yeah, they take up so much room is the challenge with it, you know. I really like the idea of the shuttle. I really like, and I haven't heard anybody else mention this, but I really like the idea of reserved parking for peak periods. We don't want to annoy our neighbors, and we want to create a safe condition and not frustrate people as attendees. So I think the reserved parking is a really good idea. In terms of a signalized crossing, I have really mixed feelings about that. From a visual and aesthetic standpoint, I'm like, well, it's a scenic highway, and no, I don't want to introduce that. But perhaps there are other ways. I saw the signage, and sometimes in the when it gets to be dusk, when it's not as easy to see people, I find that on pavement marking is a good addition to the shoulder signage, because people tend to, maybe this is my misperception, but it seems like people tend to focus on the pavement and not as much on the shoulder signage. So I think on pavement marking and indications for crossings would be helpful there. I'd prefer that over flashing light or anything like that. I really find that it might be a safety component, but it's just, I think, not appropriate there. You'll come back with more information about horse trailers and what the line of sight and timing is for that as compared to a car. I'm not really interested in putting additional parking at the lower parking area. Nobody else has spoken to that, but I'm not particularly excited about that. I don't know if someone living in the Ranger residence would be really thrilled about it either. You know, there might be some way to do, you know, some level of screening. It's a fairly large area, so maybe if there's some way to do some level of screening to provide some parking there, but I'm not terribly enthused about it. I think that was what, maybe 20 cars. That's a lot of cars to take off the table. And yet there's also the privacy considerations. And when parking is that close to a residence, I don't know if we have a history of what the public behavior is. So maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah.
If you have any comments on that?
I have a comment when you're done to share.
Go ahead.
Scott Reeves, Senior Capital Project Manager. We did meet with the current tenant. Of course, it's one person in a you know, one of our assets who was open to it. they were equally as concerned about screening, felt that adequate screening could provide them the privacy that they as an individual would want to see there. And I do think that certainly there's pros and cons to introducing parking down that close. I was going to just highlight a similar consideration that we have at South Cowell right now with a trail crossing in front of a district housing. Similarly, where we will be dealing with the privacy screening of our employees to the public. So
if that should happen, well, two questions. One is, do we have much information about public behavior? I mean, people are reasonably respectful because they're in preserves and, but in a parking lot, it's a little bit different of a mentality. So there are issues of noise, of litter, of, all kinds of things. So what's our history of this close of a proximity to ranger housing when there's parking provided?
yeah, I'm actually, thank you. I was making eye contact with Chris Baresi to see if he wanted to speak to it at all.
Are you going to make him the bad guy?
Visitor behavior, maybe at Prisma or other lots where parking lots, maybe we get different types of activity that may be less desirable for to be next to an employee housing.
I don't really have much of an answer to that. I've lived in employee housing for years at Rancho San Antonio, where I'd hear people up on the hilltop at night. So I'd call myself out and go get them out of the park. I live in a closed area now, so I don't have too much problem, but some people trespass. As far as this particular residence, I haven't heard many issues. I know the resident does get some people knocking on the door, generally for some assistance or, car trouble, stuff like that. Sometimes the gate doesn't open properly if they don't pull all the way up correctly. But I haven't heard of too much bad behavior at this parking lot. So I don't really have.
And of course, we're looking at extending the parking lot down closer to the residents. So the parking right now is fairly.
Yeah, I'd have to ask him if he hears, hooping and hollering or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, as an employee resident, I'd just say that's part of the deal, right? You're in the preserves, you're with the public, and that's part of the reason we're there. And that they, close at half hour after sunset. So, it wouldn't be late night activities generally. So we can inquire, but I have not heard of any problems with that.
Okay. All right. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Comments when you're done.
Go ahead, Director Sear.
Couple of things I wanted to pick up on. You talked about the lower parking lot. My sense of that would be, not to build it right away. We still have to deal with the situation of, if we build it, they will come. And that we've had some experience with that. That's you counterbalance with, going to all the effort to do whatever parking we're doing here and then doing it all over again. If you add the lower lot, I do think that some, parking on some kind of prearrangement may make sense, especially if it's a really crowded time frame. And then in terms of the blinking light, I agree with you that it really strikes me as being very much too urban for a scenic corridor that's supposed to be out. And one of our former board members, Larry Hassett, complained to me about Caltrans putting in a whole lot of curve ahead signs on Skyline, which is a scenic corridor, now has, 3 to 5 angle signs per corner per direction. And it really takes away from the kind of scenic effect. So if we can skip the blinking light there, I would agree with you, Director Holman, that the line markings on the pavement probably be more helpful. Certainly, I don't know who's going to be crossing in the fog, but when it's foggy up there, you don't have very much distance and you are focused, one driver is focused on the pavement and the fog line along the right edge of it. So, okay, thank you.
I have a question for staff. So we're making our comments. Are you going to accumulate our comments or do you want a motion where there's not really it was, if you go back to the, and I can switch it here. If you go back to what the director's recommendation is, it's like to receive the report, and then I can't remember what the rest of it was. Provide feedback. So do you want a motion or are you just going to take our comments and accumulate them, or what's going to be most helpful to you?
General Counsel Hillary Stevenson, I don't think that a vote is necessary. There's some reason that the committee wants to provide specific direction. It's not prohibited, but I don't think that it's necessarily solicited by the materials that are before you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Director Gleason.
Yeah, so with respect to the crossing, when we're talking about crossing markings, what specifically would that be? I mean, is that just paint or reflectors or?
Scott Reeves, Senior Capital Project Manager. The proposed improvements would just be the signs on either side denoting the general area where the crossing would be located. In historical, the other project examples, no ladders or striping on the ground was recommended, and it would just be the signs on either side. And then the advanced signs in 325 feet out on in each direction.
Right. Maybe my question is to Director Sear and Director Holman then, who mentioned, I think, road markings, right?
Well, the other thing is that, for lots of equestrian crossings over paved roads, there's simply a sign saying, "You look out, there may be a horse ahead." So that rather limits the signage. Just a thought. My concern was more with pedestrians, although pedestrians generally can run if they're walking. So.
Were you also, you were not supportive of flashing lights or any sort of, but were you also interested in markings on the pavement? And I think that's what Director Gleason's commented.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
What were you thinking in terms of painting on the pavement if there was such?
Would it be where the crosswalk was, assuming that there's just one spot to do that, and then like the diamonds or the triangles that are in urban areas prior to the crosswalk, the stop lines is effectively in this area. My imagination is that it would predominantly be an additional alert as opposed to stopping on Skyline for whatever crossing is going on. So.
And for me, I was thinking, I do try to keep urban things out of, these kinds of settings. So I was thinking, and maybe you can help me with, help us with some historical information, which is, so if you see, like in some of these signs, even you see there's a pedestrian crossing sign, taking that image and putting it on the pavement as opposed to the more urban kinds of, hashed signs. Is that used any place that you're familiar with, and is it effective?
I'm not familiar with that. The traffic control manual is pretty standardized in its selection of items. I know that new things are being introduced every year that are tested and become effective. I haven't heard of any alternate pavement markings that would denote a crossing location. Anecdotally, from my understanding, Caltrans views these highway crossings very differently from an urban crossing, where the ladder, the striping on the ground, actually denotes the limit of which the pedestrian should try to remain. And my understanding here at these locations is that because it's a rural road, the ladders can often create a false sense of security that you know, pedestrians are expected to cross with awareness and to make, you know, decisions when they're moving across a road like this. So it's a little different scenario than an urban crosswalk would be.
So I don't know if that helps Director Gleason at all. It helps me a little bit. I'm interested in something graphic but not urban on the pavement here. Maybe it's even just like a painted word, like painted words like pedestrian crossing or something like that from both directions, but something that's not the hash urban. Oh, Anna, yes, General Manager.
Yes, this is Ana Ruiz, General Manager. So if it's okay with the committee, we'll take back that feedback. It's going to depend on what will be allowed by Caltrans, and they are very particular. And so, but I think we hear that you would like to have something more that is still keeping with the rural setting, and not, you know, blasting signage everywhere, that provides a little extra awareness of the crossing for both the pedestrian, but also for the motorist. So we can take that back and see what we can do with that. I can't promise you that it'll, you know, result in something tangible, but we'll try. Because again, our experience with Caltrans, it's just been a little difficult to do some extra things on the highway, but we will bring that forward.
The definition of Caltrans is what? So one additional piece for me, and I'd like to know how my colleagues feel about this, is if you go to this slide that you just had up, I think right before this, that showed the setting. The one that shows there, it's I'm not seeing it on here. There's one where on the shoulder, it says 3 parking spaces or 7 parking places or 3 parking spaces plus a shuttle. And I prefer the latter. There you go. 7 cars or 3 cars plus a shuttle. The reason I prefer that is because a shuttle is like, you know, kind of like a touch and go. This could be kind of a touch and go kind of situation and scenario. So that would be my preference. I don't know how my colleagues feel about that. If you want to weigh in.
I'm not sure I understood
Well, there were,
what you were comparing there.
well, just if you have an opinion about, so this says defined shoulder, says 7 cars or 3 cars plus a shuttle. And I would prefer the latter there because it accommodates a shuttle, you know, getting in and out really quickly and dropping off and taking off again real quickly. So.
Right. Yeah. This is partly why I was asking the question before about, you know, how much shuttle staging area do we actually need? It does seem to me that, you know, if you could manage the shuttle with that roadside spot, then that would be, I mean, that it seems like that would be nice. I'm not sure what all the pros and cons are.
It'd be kind of tricky for it to turn around and go the other direction from that location.
If they can go through the parking lot, then I'm not sure if that's an option.
My thinking as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, is this on? It is. Oh, hello. Jane Mark, Planning Manager. I actually have some additional information about the shuttle program at Rancho. So the intent is to have it run during weekends and holidays as part of the initial pilot program. So in terms of the frequency of using a flexible space at Rancho, the area will be used on weekends and during holidays.
That's helpful. Thank you. And then we've had the question raised here. I'm sure you were thinking about this, about if a shuttle parks there, how does it turn around, or what's the thinking?
Sure. Yeah, if it needed to go northbound, it would go through the parking lot.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And
you know, these are pretty general graphics right now, so we would accommodate turning radius to allow them to enter into the parking lot to do that. Yeah.
all right, great. And are we getting too fine grained or?
No, I appreciate it.
Okay, all right. Director Gleason, do you have other comments?
I have a few things about maybe some of the other TDMs. One thing about bike racks, I think North Ridge is difficult to access by bike. So just something to consider if, if bike racks were going to take room that could be used for something else, I'm not sure if that would be the best idea. I think the other end of Turisma, like the Redwood end, might be more likely, but even then, are people going to come and leave their bike there to hike at the preserve? I'm not sure how much of that will go on. And I was also wondering about electric vehicle charging. Is that that actually seems like something that could increase demand for vehicle spaces. So I don't know if that's the best idea either. But maybe carpool. I mean, if I do actually like the idea of using the lower space. And I recognize the issues with privacy. I think, additional screening would make sense, but this is a really intensively used place, and I think we need parking space. So we need to consider all the options there.
How do colleagues feel about if the lower parking is restricted to cars and not trailers? Because I think one of the options in the report mentioned trailers in that area too. It's like I would kind of from maneuverability too, I sort of would think, and radiuses and that sort of thing. I would say that trailers would not be on the horse trailers would not be on the lower area. Would you be agreeable to that?
I'm not sure I know enough about the details to make a call on that.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can offer, certainly for the dollars invested, you would get more parking, more passenger vehicles out of that lower area than you would equestrian spaces. So the upper lot is set up very nicely for equestrian pull through. So it economy of scale wise, dollars would go further investing equestrian into the upper lot than into the lower lot.
Okay, the question has come up about charging stations, and it came up when we were up there too on the tour. So it is the real world that we're living in. It's always this push pull though, because you go someplace and you see all the EV parking spaces and they're empty. And then you go another time and they're all full, and parking generally has that flexibility. So has anybody come up with any thought about how to manage that so that we don't have 6 empty EV parking spaces? Director Sear.
Well, my sense with that is if you're going to the outback, charge before you go. I mean, I'm sure there would be some folks who might be down on battery power, but by and large, on a trip to Purisima to go hiking, my guess is, if you have an electric charging station available, that would be nice and all that, but I'm not sure that it would be necessary, and it's one more urbanization structure in the what little kind of non-urban areas we're trying to preserve.
So has staff given thought to how many, if there were EV parking stations there, charging stations there, how many it would be and how to manage that? So is it for a limited time? So one person isn't there for 5 hours and nobody else can charge if they're there? People do find, I appreciate your comments, Director Sear, and also sometimes find that they just, and need a charge. So has staff given thought to how many charging stations should they be there and how to manage them so they aren't dominated by 1 or 2 individuals?
No, I don't think, well, I can't speak to that currently. So I think we would need to come back with more information on that.
Okay. Anything else on TDM from colleagues?
Just on EV, where did that fall at Rancho? Is that on the list or not on the list?
EV. Jane,
It's part of it. Planning manager. I don't think EV charging stations are a TDM measures per se, a transportation demand management measure for managing parking congestion per se. It is part of our climate action plan in terms of looking at existing parking areas and adding to the electric vehicle infrastructure in our preserves.
It's listed here as under the, what they were, fifth bullet under highest priority TDM measures. It has EV charging state infrastructure.
For Parisima,
Uh-huh, for
yes,
Parisima.
Parisima.
And you're speaking only to Rancho. Okay.
But yeah, I'm talking to Rancho,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
So the question, I'm sorry, Director Gleason,
Do we or will we have them at Rancho? EV charging?
I don't know, Assistant General Manager Malone, do you know? Yeah, okay.
Okay, good. I think I may have been the only person to speak about parking reservations, peak period parking reservations. Do you all have opinions about that? I'm in favor of doing that. I don't know how you all feel about
The
it.
only, kind of limitation I sense is it does preclude people who don't have access to electronic means. So it does limit the potential clientele. That's all.
Well, it could be part of the, what did you call it? Flexible?
Yeah.
Flexible, so maybe some spaces could be for reserved and some could be open for anybody. Do you have a thought about that, Director Gleason?
Do we have information on the success of that type of measure in other places? I mean, outside of Midpen?
Hey, Mark, Planning Manager, in terms of flexible use of an EV charging space,
Sorry, I think we're on
okay.
reserve parking now.
Reserve parking. So there are different agencies that are implementing reserve parking. For example, I mean, I think even Santa Clara County Parks, correct? At Uvis Canyon, where you need to sign up for a time to access that county park, and there will be a reserve parking space for you. You get a permit to get in. And of course, Muir Woods, in order to access the shuttle program there, you need to sign up for reserve parking as well.
I think that's the only way you can get to Muir Woods. these
That's
days,
right.
Isn't it?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I guess to answer your question, I'd be interested in seeing some of the information from other places. And if it's particularly successful, then I think it probably would seem like a good idea.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And then if you put back up the slide, that's the questions. Want to make sure we help you as much as we can without making you crazy here. Have you gotten enough feedback to kind of give you guidance on how many standard vehicles, especially equestrian parking space? Have you feel like you've gotten enough feedback on that?
I feel like yeah, we've heard some comments about the upper and the lower expansion areas. My impression is that we will bring back ideas of maximum capacity given the current demand issues facing the lot. I would love to hear if there's a different impression that you all have about what you would like to see. Basically, we're just wanting to bring back the most meaningful design alternatives to move the project along at your next interaction with the project. So my perception is that we can show you what those full lot sizes would look like. And it's probably easier to rein those back in at that point. But certainly if there's other direction, I would be more than appreciative to hear it.
I guess what does maximum mean? Because is it maximum equestrian or maximum sedan or passenger vehicle or maximum what. So I'm on the lower end of equestrian, but I'm also open to being persuaded otherwise, given the comments from a public speaker and Director Gleason, but I don't know enough. So I don't know exactly what maximum means. Because it's going to be either cars or it's going to be equestrian, and that brings up the flexible, like maybe on, again, making it up Thursdays, we have accommodate 4 horse trailers or whatever. So I think we need more information, and I don't know how you're going to feasibly get some of that information, but
So this is Anna Ruiz, General Manager. Scott, I'm curious, is it reasonable to look at a range at this point? Looking at the low end of 2 equestrian spaces, at the high end 4, and working with that in terms of developing alternatives to bring back to the committee?
Yeah, I think that's our approach. And the other component when we talk about maximum is just the footprint available to us. So that was when I was referring to as the maximum, is really seeing what that looks like as a footprint in the area. So I think we can look at scenario or alternatives that have 2 or have 4 equestrian spaces. And similarly, we can incorporate a reservable priority area in a couple different alternatives as well to see how that works and the impacts involved.
okay, very good. Director Sear.
Just one quick thought. It looks to me like in the upper area, if people parked diagonally, you could fit in many more automobiles. I just have seen that in other kinds of situations where people are parking parallel, they get in X number of cars. And if they're parking diagonally, you can almost double that amount in the length of space. So just a thought. And it looks like you're deep enough so transit would not be restricted. The police might be diagonal on one side of the lot than the other. Just a thought.
Director Gleason, do you have more comments?
Just back on the number of spots and the equestrian and cars. I think it would be good to see, the range of flexibility. So whether we're talking about 2 equestrian, 4 equestrian, I'd also be interested in seeing the cases where that can flex, say, to 0 on certain days, right? And again, I think that needs to be worked through with stakeholder groups. But it is, it's a place where we know we have lots of overflow, I think, on peak demand days. So I think we need to be creative about how to handle this.
Agree with prior comments. So I think you've gotten enough information. Tell me if I'm wrong here on expanding. Should both parking expansion areas be utilized? I think you've gotten enough feedback on that probably. And certainly number 4, additional consideration for on-grade crossing. You've gotten plenty of feedback on that. Other amenities, is there anything else that anybody has thought about?
Just that in that area, it doesn't seem to me that we need more than just the ability for, handicap access to a restroom.
Mhm.
And the normal kinds of things that we do rather than additional. Well, we were talking about the EV charging as an amenity, but I think other than that we've already discussed, I don't see the need for any more personally at this point.
And I must have read this somewhere because it's not on this list. E-bike parking. I guess bicycle parking is bicycle parking. Maybe it was it was in one of the surveys. I think that was where it was. E-bike parking, but bike parking is bike parking. So I don't think we need to address that, do we?
Not at this juncture, not to bring back design alternatives.
Okay, all right. Unless there's something else, General Manager, do you have any questions, comments, or either of my colleagues, anything else to add? Or if either of you have something more that you want to hit us with and bounce off of us or whatever. Are you good? Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for all of this work. And again, I'm very admiring of your ability to deal with all the complexity of these projects. A very, very, very difficult puzzle.
Just would echo what Director Gleason said. Congratulations on a job very thorough, and hope we haven't given you twice the job to do all over again. So, thanks.
These are very complex, and what you bring forward is well thought out, and I appreciate giving us options and asking our feedback. Very good presentation, good staff report. It's complicated. We're not building a city parking lot. So I appreciate all the sensitivities that we represent for the public, and I know you do too. So thank you very much. And if there's nothing else, it seems like there's one. Oh, and I just wanted to add that doing the site visits, I can't speak highly enough about how important they are and how helpful they are, even though I forgot where the other screening was or wasn't. But those on-site visits are just critically important. So thank you very much for that. So, okay, I guess that is it. And unless there's anything else, our meeting is adjourned.